is Fothergill. You're very welcome to come. And I see we have a good number of people online as well. So everyone, welcome to our CDR and Yorkshire and Humber and the Humber and the Humber. Sorry, thank you. The Humberside Operations Research Group. This is the first time we organize this seminar together. This is part of the basic CDR seminar series that you can see on the screen. This is the fifth on this series during the spring, but this is the first time we organize it together with YHORG. I hope you pronounce it YHORG, or do you just say YHORG? I'm not sure. But we're very happy to do it together, and we hope this can be repeated in the future. So with that, I give Diego the floor to present our speakers today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much to the management school in Leeds and everyone here, David or David and Sajid. Thank you very much for all that you have done to host us here. It's really a pleasure to have this joint seminar with you, CDR and YHORG. YHORG is the right way that you say it. And well, it has been a quite interesting journey to be able to finally meet you here. And I think that after the full stop that we had during the pandemic, we are taking back speed at YHORG, and then we are getting to know each other, getting to work each other. Last year we had a online meeting, and then, well, now it's our first face-to-face meeting. No, that last October, was it online or was it a face-to-face meeting, the last meeting of YHORG?
I think it was hybrid.
It was a hybrid,
I was in the Informs conference,
yeah,
but I think
it was hybrid.
October,
So
November.
it's the second time that we are meeting together in person, and I hope that we are going to retain work together. And next time it will not just be meeting, but also discussing some joint projects with people of the universities in the Yorkshire and the Humber Operations Research Group. Without more further ado, let me tell you which is more or less the agenda that you already know for the day. Sorry, I did not introduce myself. I am Diego Ruiz Fernandez. I'm from Sheffield University Management School, and I'm together with Max Mullin, or Mulan, I don't know what's the right way to pronounce it. Mullin. Okay. So together with Max, we are the co-chairs of the group. I'm giving already the introduction. That's what you are listening now. I will quickly talk to you about our speakers, and then we are going to have our YHORG spring meeting. Everybody is invited to stay. It will just be 10 more minutes of your time. If you don't want to stay, you are not imposed to stay. If you are not part of YHORG, but it will be good to hear what I have to tell you about YHORG. And then there will be some networking, some fantastic scones and gluten-free cakes and things that we can share together. Okay, so that's as much as for the introduction that I want to say. I will not talk about YHORG because I want to leave that for the end. There is a couple of announcements that I would like to make. So when Maxa asked me what would be a good idea to bring today to our meeting, I thought that one of the problems that we face in our area in operations research is that in many cases, academics, we are completely detached from reality. Okay, I was telling them during the lunch that an anecdote of a quite rude person back in the Royal Holloway. I think that it was 2015 or 16 in the ORS meeting, and during one of the coffee breaks. During one of the coffee breaks, we're talking with a person, a colleague from Lancaster University and myself. And he ended up, he turned out being a practitioner. And when Christopher asked what he was doing at the meeting at the Royal Holloway, this person answered, well, I'm here to teach academics what real life is about. And it was a very good answer, but at the end, it is true. Sometimes it seems that we are quite detached from reality. We have fantastic ideas that look very good from our textbooks and our papers and our desks. But in reality, they have little or not much to do with the real problems that are being faced by colleagues in industry and trade and government and etc. So thinking of this, the next question that came to my head was, well, what can we learn from publications is really what we are publishing, reflecting the main concerns of industry in nowadays. And then I thought, well, what would be best than inviting a practitioner with a long career in health care, like Gary, and Francisco Saldanha-da-Gama, a chief editor of one of the most important journals in our area, and say, what do you think of that? Is there really a detachment between us? Francisco, do you feel that what you see our colleagues submitting, the works that you see our colleagues submitting to your journal, and what you hear from colleagues in the industry, is there at least a tendency, maybe not a subset, but at least we are touching common interests? And that's the way that came to life, the agenda that we have for today. So first of all, we'll have Gary talking to us about his personal journey through healthcare and the opportunities for OR methods in the sector. And then that will be a 30 minutes presentation plus 5 minutes for questions and answers. We have plenty of time, so if we need a little bit more time, if the discussion comes too interesting, we can always extend a bit the time. And then we'll talk with Francisco about academic publishing in OR, past, present, and future. And again, we have 30 minutes and 5 minutes, but then it will be better, it will be quite interesting to have a wider conversation between all of us about these two main topics and the main idea that motivated this meeting. It's a pleasure to see you, Gary. We are ready for you. Thank you very much.
So, just to comment on your observations, I'm a practitioner, so I'm here to tell you academics what real life's all about. Right, so is that my presentation? Cool. So, just a couple of facts. So I have a background in healthcare. The NHS spends roughly £200 billion of taxpayers' money to provide healthcare for population. It's the 5th biggest employer in the world. So McDonald's, Walmart, the American military, and the Red Army are the only organisations that have more staff than the NHS. So as an organisation goes, massive. So a disclaimer. All comments, all thoughts, my own. They don't represent the NHS because I don't work for the NHS anymore. Some might be uncomfortable with some of the things I say, but they are a lived experience. I'm not making these things up. These are things that have really happened. Just as a quick straw poll, do we have any people in who are working in healthcare currently? No? Academia? How many academics have we got? Civil service? Cool. So civil service, you are taking on NHS England soon? Good. So who am I? So I'm a child of Generation X. So, you know, latchkey kid, learned by his mistakes. When we got trouble, we either thumped somebody, we didn't have no recourse, we didn't have all the Twitter stuff that we have nowadays. When I was at school, I got left with 3 O-levels, got sick to death at school. All I wanted to be was a footballer. I'm 58 years old now, and I'm still playing, so I spent most of my post school years working in the steel industry. Sheffield's big steel, as you well know. I've actually been a professional musician, which might seem a slightly weird diversion from working in steel, but I did for 2 years. I returned to higher education in the 1990s, and I was fortunate to be taught by a fantastic faculty at Sheffield University. It completely changed my life, and they instilled some fantastic personal traits in me. And I left there in 1996 with a BSc Honours in Systems Modelling, Management Science, Operational Research. Same thing, different name. And that's where I was introduced to the world of operational research, and Max Mullen that actually taught me discrete event simulation, and it's to Max I owe a lot of this too. You can hook up with me on LinkedIn if you want. There's only one Gary Fothergill, fortunately. So my journey through healthcare didn't actually start in the NHS. It actually started with a privateer American company called HBO. So they came into the healthcare market in the early 90s through aggressive acquisition. So they bought a lot of healthcare systems, so things like PAS systems, so patient administration systems, HIS systems, so hospital information systems, labs and all that type of stuff. And they supplied systems to the NHS and just about all NHS organisations. They merged in 1999 with a company called McKesson. McKesson's a pharmaceutical company. Both had grand needs to diversify in their own market. So HBO wanted to move out of computing and into something else. McKesson wanted to move out of solely doing pharmaceuticals and into something else. So they were a perfect marriage. So I stayed there until 2003. And that's when the whole debacle of the National Programme for IT happened, which was going to revolutionise everything and revolutionise nothing. Lots of money wasted. My organisation was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in the country. Unfortunately, it didn't do its due diligence, just expected to be named as a prime supplier, didn't get named as a prime supplier, and then it was time to leave because all of a sudden you can't sell anything into the NHS. So if you're going from fishing in a lake to fishing in a puddle. So I thought it's time to move on and use some of these statistical skills that I'd learned at university. So I joined the NHS in 2003. Stayed there until 2014, where I got an opportunity to go out into the desert and spend a few weeks out there. Thank you. Working for Hamad Medical, and I'll talk about that in more detail. 2017, I went on to work for NHS Improvement, so we've gone from a Q to ALB regulator. And I took up the South Yorkshire branch of the Association of Professional Healthcare Analysts, so I became a branch lead for AFA. 2018, I went to work with one of the think tanks, so one of the big three, so that's the Health Foundation. So there's the Nuffield Kings and the Health Foundation. So you'll hear them on the news quite regularly when they're commenting on government policy around healthcare. 2019, I left the NHS and set up a little consulting company. In 2020, I became an executive director of AFA. And then in 2024, I got put out to pasture. I decided to retire. So the finishing flag happened in November last year, which was fabulous. So when I went to the NHS in 2003, the first job I had was working with the Director of Clinical Operations. There was some magic work done by an organisation called the Modernisation Agency, where they started to put the fundamentals of OR methods into the healthcare domain. And they built these lovely leadership guides, they were called, and it showed all people in the hospital how you could do proper scheduling. But you know, these were sat on people's shelves and gathered dust. The Director of Clinical Operations was a nurse, and he found that having good insights and value-driven decision making were really, really important in healthcare. And it became a really, really fruitful relationship for both of us. And he encouraged me to go out into the system and learn. So go out and work with clinicians, go out and find what problems are, go out and see if you can help them with the solution. Perhaps give them some ideas about the art of the possible. What he didn't want them to do was sit in a bunker or an ivory tower somewhere, writing SQL code and building the ubiquitous dashboard. I've never done that in my NHS life, and I'm so glad that I haven't done that. I've come to analytics in a very, very different way. When they said cigarettes and alcohol were killing the NHS, I would argue it's variability and the lack of understanding around variability. So when I got to Sheffield Teaching Hospitals, I thought, well, there's going to be loads of people that know OR, you know, we're an £800 million organisation. And when I got there, it was like a desert. There was nobody in that organisation that had the skill set that I had. So for me to try and articulate what skills I had were really difficult because people didn't know about OR. But wasn't there an library in the Department of Health in Leeds
Yes,
and another one in London?
yeah, but not in local organisations where the care is delivered.
Right.
That's very different.
And no link between your job there and
No.
that. Obviously, they do have.
You've got 153 sovereign organisations that sit and provide care. You know, the fact that there's big organisations at the top end of the chain that have got those sorts of people in them, we haven't got them at local level. And I think where operational researchers will add a lot of value is actually working with people towards the care end of delivery, and actually making the system better. So there was hardly any operational research capability. A lot of people just lifted and shifted data and fed the beast. How many widgets did we do? How many operations did we do? No concept time series, just very, very poor analytics. Lots of strategic work done using really, really naive methods. And when you know that things aren't being equated to in planning, you say, well, actually, what about variation? Oh, we've not bothered with that because, well, don't patients vary? Does it vary from month to month what we do? None of that. Lots of planning's done using extrapolated averages. The average is ubiquitous in healthcare. Everybody talks about the mean. What about median? What about sigma? You don't talk about sigma and sigma, you talk about its variation because sigma just goes people's brains. There's a lot of bad science. And if you've ever read Ben Goldacre's book, I would recommend it because it just shows you some of the stupidity in and around healthcare. But what I found is trying to articulate the value of our methods to hospital managers is really, really difficult. They just don't get it. And I think it's quite a sweeping statement that a lot of people working in hospitals that are in that sort of middle manager range are statistically illiterate. And that's quite a sweeping statement, but that's my lived experience. Try to speak to people and talk about concepts is really, really difficult. So I'll give you an example, and this is quite funny and quite dark in a sad way. So the preamble is we've got a tool called discrete event simulation, and what I try to do is build up that capability in Sheffield. Found it really difficult, but I'll just give you an example in elective orthopedics. So when you're an orthopedic surgeon, you've trained for 20 years, and what you want to do is to do the best with the skills you've got for the patients that you're treating, and that's really, really important because you can change people's lives. You know, if you've got a bad hip and you're in a lot of pain, you fix the hip, the world's a lot better place. What you don't want to do is to have an operating list on a Monday morning, knowing that you've worked really hard to clear all your beds the weekend before, to come in Monday morning to do your operation to find that your bed has got an elderly patient in it because they've overspilled from geriatrics. I've seen orthopedic surgeons get very, very upset by the fact that they're not operating, and rightly so. So what we did is we talked about moving our elective orthopedic operating from a hot site, which is the site that's got the A&E on it, so we're getting lots of non-elective patients coming in, moving it over to the YHORG, which is a cool site. So we know that patients aren't going to be usurping other patients with beds, so that Monday morning when the bed's clear, an operation will take place. So we're doing a bit of bed protection. So this is the brief. So as I mentioned, we're moving from hot to a cool site. First exam question we've got to do is we've got to stop operations being cancelled. Because when an operation gets cancelled, it has to be rescheduled within 28 days and it's got to happen within 28 days. Okay? Now, we want to stop routine elective work that should be done in a hospital, being done on a private site by our surgeons, but we're paying a privateer to do it. So all that money that we spent on theatres, we're losing money on unit cost because that fixed cost that we've done, we're putting less work through it. Now, this is something that Professor Professor Tim Evans, I should say, talked about is going up to the golden nugget. So going to the private hospital when it should be doing in the public sector. Second exam question is, how many beds do we need to recover these patients? Okay. So we've got three types of patients. We've got hip replacements and knee replacements, hip and knee replacements for the second time, revisions, and soft tissue procedures. So these are things like ACLs. So, you know, footballers injured when you snap the tendons in the knees and stuff. So there's a significant investment on this decision. And we've got to install laminar airflow in a 1960s building that is, you know, a feat in itself. So we've just done an experiment, and we know that we can get patients home quickly using an enhanced recovery. And we've got an opportunity to understand how using that protocol can help us get patients through the system faster, get good outcomes, and all the good stuff that comes with it. So historical capacity planning in the NHS is usually a very mediocre affair. I hope I've articulated well with that really poor graphic of an abacus. The reality is, it's the back of a fag packet with pencil and rubber. And it's actually ubiquitous in the health service as well. How did you come to that number? Oh, well, a bit of a fag packet calculation. So this is how they did it. So this is the orthopedic directorate. And I'll give you an example of how they do this. So take the number of patients they're going to treat in a year, multiply it by the length of stay, divide by 365, and then divide it again by 0.85 for that. Now, there's some very bright people in this room. Can anybody see any flaws with that? It's crap in it. I'm quoting Joe Ratner there, for those of you who can remember Joe Ratner. But, so an example is 1,000 patients times 4 days, 4,000 bed nights, divided by 365, put in a fudge factor, then Robert Schimmel's answer, and we get 13 beds. That's just absolute garbage. So I got asked to sense check this, ready for business sign off. I said, this is not good, guys. You're going to have to up your game a little bit. And they couldn't, because that's the best they could do. So I said, well, we've got some software that we've just bought, and we're going to, would you be happy for us to build a simulation model of it? And they went, what simulation? Is that where you start using tactics on a dummy? For those of you who are in healthcare, you'll know that when you do simulations, you might do a real life heart pumping on a model. That's what simulation is. So they said, well, yeah, whatever. So we'll skip through that because we know that it's rubbish. And this is a really good slide. Every system's perfectly designed to deliver the results it gets. So I built a model. We built the length state distributions. No method, no talk about data schedules. No talk about length of stay and variation within length of stay, nothing. I built all that into the model. So they said they needed 18 beds to do the work that they plan to do. Remember the brief, remember the number of beds, and no cancellations. So in 2 years after running the model, we'd have 512 cancellations, we'd be stuffed to the gunnels, we'd be cancelling left, right, and centre. It would be an absolute disaster. So by doing a simulation model, we could demonstrate an evidence base that what they were trying to achieve weren't going to work. And remember, at the end of it, these are patients, these little people that are running around, the patients. It could be your mum, it could be your dad, it could be your brother, sister, yeah? And they're going to get cancelled and all the rigmarole that goes with it. So we said, what bed space do we really need to do to have no cancellations? The mean calculation was right. So average occupancy would be 18 beds. But look at the variation that the operating schedule throws up. Remember, we're assuming that you're operating 7 days a week. We're assuming that stay is flat across the week. There's nothing around. If we do more operations at the start of the week versus the end of the week, none of that. So that's what we've got to manage. So they said, actually, we need to put more beds in. can you do? Now, obviously, this cost associated with that, but given that the brief was no cancellations, we get the work through. That's what we went with. So by just using a little bit of decent science, we got a good outcome. Interestingly, the bed model was really accurate. So these peaks and troughs very much aligned with what happened in reality when it was in place. So just a little bit of science can get you a long way. While I was at STH, I'm very, very fortunate to bump into a doctor who I met while he was an SPR, actually. He's just coming towards the end of the training. And he absolutely got this operational research stuff. So we built lots and lots of small models, and these small models were really, really quite transformative. Certainly around hematology and rheumatology infusions, we actually showed that we had an untoward event where somebody was given a wrong infusion, and we showed that by the way that they scheduled the clinic, that they were going to get a big hump of patients in the middle of the day, which were more than they should have had for the staff that they got on. So essentially, we're unsafe. So a nurse that had done that infusion was in the naughty corner, but we actually put evidence together to tell them that actually it's not their fault. If you've got patients more than you've got, then you need to get your staffing ratios up. So we saved her, which was great. What we also did, we started to look at John's attendance at his clinic using Markov chains and validating it with discrete event simulation. So we've finally got an understanding of the distribution of attendances for chronic illness. And it's interesting, once you got into the system, you're going to consume on average 14 appointments, but that ranged from 1 to 80. So some of those patients John would be seeing for the rest of his clinical career. And I think it was that probably pushed him over the edge for him to stop being a doctor. I did quite a lot of work around ED crowding, which is one measure that people in ED tend to look at. You also look at post-acute assessment. So this is when you actually get into the hospital and you get your first interaction with the doctor. I also did a big piece of work around understanding structured treatment reviews. This is a big thing about learning from death. So this is when somebody dies in hospital and they get reviewed using a framework to see if they've got good care or not. So this is, quite sort of important stuff that OR sort of helped to inform. I also did work around outpatient capacity in respiratory medicine for 2-week wait patients. So these patients got cancer. Call handling were a fantastic one. One of the managers said, I need more staff, I need more staff. Right, okay. So why do you need more staff? Well, I've got 4 staff and the phones are busy all the time, and then I even have to jump in because we get to points where we've got all hands on deck. Right? Yeah. So the manager told me it's not like that. We want to wait to bust the anecdote. So I sort of developed things called deterministic simulations to start looking at transactional stacking of data to find out what utilization were. Interestingly, they never got anywhere near having 4 or 5 people in busy at any one time. So that were good because there's just a load of money there. Doing things like tracking case notes, because when a case note's being tracked around the system, when it's being discharged, it's waiting to be paid. So this things about finance, about money being held back by notes not being sent around the system quick enough. Surgical services bed requirements, a bit like the orthopedics, frailty units. So used quite a lot. Then I went to the desert and had some fun in Qatar. About that time, Dr. Bolton had gone to Qatar and said, do you want to come over and have a few weeks play and see what you think about coming out here to work full time? So I went out, it wasn't for me. But while I was there, I did some work around the simulation model for a medical hotel. So in Qatar, it's a bit like the NHS, there's a state-funded health service. So if you're a migrant worker and you fall off scaffolding and break your leg, You'll get rushed into hospital, it won't cost you anything, and some of the best surgeons in the world will fix your break. The problem that they've got is that after 5 or 6 days in hospital, they want to discharge you. There's no concept of primary care so it's not like being discharged back to your GP room. So you get discharged back to a migrant worker camp that's squalid, and what happens? Infections. So that starts a cycle of infected person then needs to come in to be uninfected, to go out again, to be reinfected, and come back again. So what we decided to do was look at building a medical hotel. So once you had your fracture fixed or whatever illness it was, you went to a hotel that had 3 square meals a day, a television and a bed in it, but the rooms were clean. So you could then go and have further rehabilitation and then be discharged when it was safe. So that cuts down infections, it cuts down recurrences of admission. So, you know, for the sake of building a building and putting some, you know, public support workers, you don't need to have nurses in it. You can save a lot of money and actually get better outcomes. So when I came back to Sheffield, I went to an event in Leeds. Healthcare, operational research in healthcare in Leeds. Fantastic. I'm now going to actually get to meet people who've got the same sorts of skills as me. So I turned up to this hotel in Leeds, 60 people, you know, in a room, cabaret style like they do in the NHS. And Professor Martin Pitt and Professor Mohammed, I don't know if you've ever heard about those names. Both of them academics. They talked about a project they've been doing around ambulances in the southwest. And at the end of that, they did a simulation model. So we said to the floor, is anybody else doing any sort of work like this? So I'm thinking, wow, you know, I'm with all my peers here, so I put my hand up. I was the only person to put my hand up because nobody in that room was an operational researcher. So everybody got a sort of thing about what's this operational research stuff. I was the only practitioner there. So Mohammed said, could I come to Sheffield and look at some of the simulation models you've built? Of course you can. So he came and he said, these are great. How would you feel about if we put together a little program where we got all people from the trusts in and around South Yorkshire and Humber, get them in a room at Bradford University, a day a month, to show them how to build simulation models? Yeah, no problem. So I spoke to the people at Simulate, who I've got a really good relationship with. I said, would you be happy to apply give us the software on academic licenses? They went, yeah, of course we would. So out of that meeting, we ended up doing the Simulation Associates. And we were fortunate that the University of Exeter and Martin's team came up with some problem handling seminars. So that was great. So we did that. We had a graduation at the end of it. And then through that, I got asked if I'd joined this program that had been funded by the Health Foundation, Cleverer. So this is about planning effective transformation in health using operational research and advanced analytics. So this report had come out, and you can go online and find it. And it talks about data in the NHS and analytics, and it paints quite a bleak picture. And I would argue it's as valid today as it was back in 2016. So if you can go online, you can get this PDF, or if you go into the website, you can get an actual physical copy of it. So we as a group of us, we pulled together to try and push the NHS to embrace OR a little bit more than it currently had. Some of the names on there you'll probably recognise from your academic links. Stephen Lorimer's head of OR, I think, at the OR Society now. So, you know, got quite a few people from different strands of the UK health and care sector. Then I went to NHS Improvement, so that's one of the regulators. I was seconded for a year, that became 2. I was one of the disruptors that pushed to get R into the NHS. And then I became one of the branch leads for AFA, which is Association of Professional Healthcare Analysts. But I think learning through that period, I realised that good analytical capability was the same throughout the NHS. So quickly, to sort of finish off, I did a big project for around activity planning. When it comes to planning, everybody were doing, well, same as last year, but a bit more, rather than, you know, what are you really doing? So I did some work in and around R, started using univariate forecasting, built plannings, built activity plans for every trust in the country, all 153 of them. So R chucked out 7,000 forecasts, and it did make a difference. I can't click on the link because I haven't got time, but that's talking about the Chief Financial Officer at NHS Improvement saying that by doing some proper forecasting, we actually got better plans. Quickly, I did some work for National Audit Office around hospital length of stay, ED attendances. Preamble to COVID-19, we did some work around 18 weeks RTT. We had a big event in London, and we said, this is 2019. How do you think about using things like Teams to have outpatient appointments? No, we couldn't possibly do that. It took us 5 years to implement something like that. It's absolutely non-starter. COVID came along, did it in 2 weeks. So that's hospital managers, just not. I went to the Health Foundation while I was at NHSI, did 6 months 50-50 with them. Best job I've ever had, working for one of the think tanks. And I was there because I provided a practitioner perspective. You see there with the chronic water t-shirt. Interestingly, I did a session at East Kent. We went to do some assurance for one of the AAA programs. And I asked, so I did the orthopedic example that I've shared with you today. And I said, does anybody still use this? And so my heart dropped because 8 people put their hands up. So even in Sheffield, they were doing exactly the same in East Kent when it came to the calculation of beds. And that just seems to be, that's the way you do it. And that's why stuff never works. So at the end, I actually worked with Martin Bardsley and Adam Stevenson. And if you want to download that, you can. And it's our perspective of analytics in the healthcare industry. So I carried on working for the Health Foundation. I did the AAA program for 4 years. I continued to work for them as an advisor, and I did the AAA for social care. Now you think it's bad in the acute sector and hospital side, it's even worse in social care. Analytics is non-existent. That's really sad. I also acted as a judge for the Florence Nightingale Awards, which were great with the RSS. I work for the Association of Professional Healthcare Analysts, and that's about getting analysts to be front and centre of decision making in the NHS, rather than sat in ivory towers building dashboards. So I helped build a framework so you could get professionally registered, so you could show that you were competent as a healthcare analyst. So that's me getting my certificate, because I put a portfolio forward, had it peer reviewed, that said I'm competent, which I felt quite reassured by. So I became an exec director in 2020, and then I left in 2022. Did some work as a privateer in and around the COVID pandemic. So rather than doing dashboards, I looked at bed occupancy through COVID. I looked at organisational resilience. So how long would it take an organisation to fall off if we had a second wave? And interestingly, for the hospital I was working with, Salford, if it had carried on doubling every 3 days before we had lockdown, they would have lasted 3 weeks before they would have just completely ground to a halt. So using that learning from the first wave, we could start to do projections about what a second wave might be and how it might affect patients. So more recently, I've done some more work with NHSE. I worked with one of the CSUs for about 6 months. Last job I did, and this is quite ironic and quite sad, I did a stint with a small DGH, not really miles away from me. I built them an automated ED attendance forecast model using profit from Meta, using R, with an 8 weeks forecast horizon with a 5.5% rate, which is good for daily ED attendances. They don't use it. Don't know why, but they just don't use it. I don't know if it's too complicated, but all it does, it says you're going to have 300 attendances tomorrow. So plan for 300 attendances. You don't use it. Simple things like discharge patterns. They don't know when the discharges are happening. You know, this is all fundamental stuff. Waiting list forecasts. So if you carry on getting people in at a given rate and you work at a given rate to get them off, what are you going to be like in 12 months? That just blew their minds. And I ended up having to teach people about simple capacity and demand. So in 20 years, I actually came full circle. But I'm here today for a reason. We need to build better analytical capability in the NHS. It's an absolute given. And NHS needs operational researchers. They need operational researchers in each organisation, like you alluded to earlier. And they need to be working with clinicians to make services better for patients, rather than sat in an ivory tower. The NHS doesn't value analysts. And I think a move from an arm's length body back into the government might actually make a difference through GOES. So, you know, it'd be nice to see GOES registered analysts in hospital. And I guess for some of you just starting your careers, it's about networking. Networking is super, super important. So I just wanted to share my journey with you. But it's also good to see what other people are doing in this workspace. And of course, to shamelessly steal, because that's not a bad thing. Quick, I've got 2 minutes. I know I've gone over a little bit. So while I was working at the Health Foundation, I was one of the expert reviewers for the AAA programme. So this is where we've got £750,000 of charitable funds to give away. It's about 10 projects, 75 each, about using a novel way to use analytics to help patient care. So one trust wanted to build up a data science function. So they asked if they could use that 75k to get some licenses from DataCamp. So they had this big kickoff event, and the lady who was running the program shared this story with me. That she said we had lots and lots of people that were really excited by the fact that we were moving towards a data science model rather than a traditional model. And this guy came in who was a bit of a laggard, quite senior person. And he said, he walked over to us, sort of shuffled over towards us and said, "Can you tell me about this in one?" So she said, as the lead, I just froze because I hadn't got a clue what he was talking about. So she said, I stood there and thinking on my feet, oh my God, I'm here as a lead and I don't know what he's talking about. So she said, what do you mean by A1? He went, you know, that thing where computers learn. Oh, you mean AI? Thank you very much. No.
Any questions, please?
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to what comments I made earlier when we had a Department of Health. Sorry, a Department of Health with up to 100 OR
consultants, which has been there for 50 years and been carrying out the sort of studies that you've just described. And yet there seems to be a need to do the studies over and over again from what you're saying. So why isn't there a memory in the NHS?
What happens is we get people that will start with that stuff, and then as they progress through time, it's just ingrained and entrenched in the system. So this is how you do things. And then all those people that are coming through that are going to backfill those people when they retire or leave, they just take on the same methods. So it's just a perpetual cycle of garbage, basically. And that's how it's done. And that's the sad thing.
I have no connection with that work at all.
No, but I think it's a very, 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 very pertinent question. And you would think that those sorts of people would absolutely benefit an organisation. But you get this situation where when you try to articulate sometimes relatively simplistic concepts to people who don't have anything like an appropriate statistical background, it's really, really difficult, and they don't see it as something that they need to have as part of their job. And I think a lot of people see it as a sign of weakness, that if you can't engage with it and articulate with it, that you're thick or you're not very bright. But that's what it's like. It's really sad. Do any other more questions?
Oh, I'm going to red challenge right now.
Yeah, you please do.
So I'm working at the Advanced Manufacturing Research Center, University of Sheffield. So, and basically, like, I'm using discrete event simulation heavily. And I've been in contact with some of the GPs from the Sheffield primary care.
Yeah.
And they believe that discrete event simulation is a very valuable tool for them to, work on this demand and capacity problem. But the challenge that we're having is they don't have funding, and we need to find a funding source to kickstart the work. Can you give some recommendations on how we can,
Well, essentially,
progress?
What you just mentioned there is essentially what the AAA program was for the Health Foundation. So we're looking for people like yourself and GP partners in Sheffield to bid for funds to provide novel ways of using analytics to help increase patient care. The only thing I can suggest is contact the Health Foundation. Please do. I'll give you the name and the contact when we finish. But you've just got to search. So I think any forward-thinking organisation would say, this is important. This is going to help us get better care for our patients. We'll find the money from somewhere. So, it's a bit of that burning platform. If it's that important, you should be able to find money to do it. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being straight on.
Let's continue because we are tight with time. So let's open a series of questions after. Thank you very much for that excellent example of networking. That's our next presenter. I think that's cool. SMT publishing, that's you.
Because I saw people in that corner do a lot of exercise with their necks. So it's better to do it like this. And I'm also putting the keyboards here because it helps me to move around the room. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's my great pleasure to be here. It's my third time in Leeds, my second time in Leeds Business School. My second time was visiting the School of Computer Science to listen to a good friend of mine presenting a seminar. And today is my turn to make a presentation. I must say that I have days in which it seems that my operating system and English don't match very well, so it seems that the vocabulary doesn't come up to my mind easily. And I am in one of those days, so I cannot promise too much. Possibly I will make many mistakes, but I'm sure you're going to forgive me. The second thing I would like to say is that the talk I'm presenting today is a bit different from everything that I have presented so far. Usually I present technical talks about my research, or I am invited to explain how to write, how to organize, say, a scientific paper. But the challenge that Diego gave to me was a bit beyond that, because he wanted me to discuss a little bit, or at least to give some information that allows raising the discussion about whether
scholarly articles are doing their job, let's say. Well, the original title of the presentation was this one, publishing in OR journals, past, present, and future. Then I thought I'm going to change because I realized that it was written in a different way here, issues and challenges. So for the second time, I changed the title to make sure that the title would match the agenda for today. And then when I finish this presentation, I must say that I'm wearing several hats today. Actually, I am editor of Computers and Operations Research, which is an Elsevier journal. So I didn't know exactly what would be the first thing I should put here. But because we are talking about scholarly publishing, I thought, okay, perhaps Diego invited me because I'm editor of Computers and OR, but on the other hand, I'm also in the University of Sheffield. I'm also in the rebranded Supply Chain Operations and Logistics Applied Research Center that we call nowadays SOLAR. But when I finished preparing my presentation, I decided to change the title for the third time, and hopefully it's the last time, because I realized that what I'm going to say or what I'm going to talk about, in fact, can be applied to scholarly publishing in general, to what we call scientific, technical, and medical publishing. And moreover, I understood that I don't have answers to Diego's questions. So I thought it would be better, instead of writing past, present, and future, because it seems that I know all of that, that I could put just some thoughts. Well, this is the agenda of my talk today. Of course, I will talk a bit about Elsevier. I could also talk about Springer, because I also work a lot with Springer. I know these two publishers very well. I know many people from inside. I know how things work there. But because I'm editor of a journal, I thought I'm going to talk about Elsevier because it's the publisher of the journal. So I'm going to use Elsevier and Computers and OR throughout my presentation, but just to transmit some of my thoughts, okay? Just to give some examples so that we understand exactly how did we get to where we are and whether we are in a good point or not. This is the question, let's say, okay? Well, when we talk about, oh, I went directly to the very end. This was not my, I'm really sorry. I'm a bit, today it seems that it's not only the English. Let's see. Oh. Diego, if I start talking too much, please shut me down, okay?
No.
Just let me know. Okay, let's talk about scholarly publishing. I like history a lot. Actually, I wanted to study history with my parents in the law. So that's why I decided to study maths and computer science in the beginning, and then slowly I moved to ORMS, to statistics and all these things. But I like history a lot, and I wanted to understand exactly where did all this start. And I was looking for the first scholarly journal, and I realized that it was published, the first article, first volume, was already in the 17th century. It was called Philosophical Transactions, and I have here a screenshot of these first papers. Curiously, this journal changed its name in the 18th century and still exists. This is a screenshot of the website of the journal. I just made it yesterday. Okay, so it's very fresh. So we talk about scholarly publishing already for a long time. And when we talk about the scholarly journal, we are talking about a journal that is exclusively devoted to science. And then, say after the Second World War, there was a term that started being used to describe scholarly publishing, which was scientific, technical, and medical publishing. This term was adopted after an international association with the same acronym. Well, the interesting thing, and this is important to understand, is that at the time when we started talking about STM, most of the books and journals were published by learned societies. And what was the implication of this? The implication was that we could only publish in JORS, for instance, if we were members of the YHORG society. Or we could only publish in YHORG if we were members
of a national or society that is member of Europe. So there was some limitation, and researchers could publish only in journals that were published by the societies they belonged to. Until 1951 came, and a very controversial guy called Robert Maxwell. Actually, controversy was in his genes because even one out of his 9 children, Ghislaine Maxwell, became also very controversial by marrying Jeffrey Epstein. And I think that the rest of the history, you know, if you are paying attention to the news. Well, but he was a very controversial guy. But we owe a lot to him. So I'm not saying that he was good or bad. I'm just saying that in 1951, after maturing the idea for several years, 3-4 years, he created a publisher called Pergamon. And he started making scientific publishing a business. And at the time, he created many journals. Like if you come across a journal called International Journal of or Computers and, it's very likely that that journal was created by Robert Maxwell in the 50s. It's not the case of Computers and OR, but Computers and OR was actually created in the 60s. For those of you who don't know, Computers and OR was created in 1963 with an editor-in-chief, Sam Raff, directly assigned to the journal. Sam Raff, who has already passed away, was the editor of the journal until 2003, so for 40 years. The thing is that the journal was created and he needed 11 years to really set up the journal and start printing it. So, like it or not, Robert Maxwell made scientific publishing available to everybody. And if we nowadays can complain that our papers are not accepted in the journals or that I have a very nice application that was rejected in that journal, if we can complain, it's because publishing became, say, more democratic in the 50s.
Could I just have a comment?
Of course.
About Maxwell, he did identify this market after the war, like you say, 1951. And until then, I think as you said, Scientific Association published their own journal. He came in and said, I will print your journal, I will send a copy to every member, and I'll give you, the society, £10,000. No, I'll give you a half share of the profits, or £10,000 every year. And that was sometime in the late 50s. It started as the operation.
Exactly. I told that he started, he started maturing these ideas in actually 1948.
Yeah.
This is when he started maturing these ideas. Okay. Actually, this is the cover of a book that was printed in 1998 to celebrate exactly 40 years of his scientific publishing. Actually, what he did was basically to make this a business.
And the LR Society Journal was the second journal that he bought and set up.
Yeah, and then of course we know Pergamon, but in 1991, LCDA bought Pergamon. This is probably why I'm here today, because I became, for some reason, editor-in-chief of one of the LCDA journals. But what I'd like to say is that many changes can be observed actually in 350 years of STM publishing. Actually, we have a very increased number of scientists. It is estimated nowadays to be around 4 million. We have 23,000 journals around, so we cannot complain from the other side. Okay, and this will bring me to part of my conclusions. We have an increased number of articles published per year, around 2.5 million. We have observed the progression from print to online, and here we see many things like online submission and peer review, increased usage of at a lower cost per article, for instance, new functionalities like linking and searching, new publishing models like open access and pay-per-view, new peer reviewing models like post-one and peer choice, shift from issue to article-based publishing. Well, we could keep going, but nevertheless, I would say that an article didn't change so much. it's still print-based. Of course, now we talk a lot about PDFs when we read them in the PDF format, but we still see a linear reading, and still, I mean, we could explore more this potential it is by using new tools that are made available to us. Well, I think it's an interesting idea to give you an overview of what a publisher is. This is just one example, as I told you. When we talk about Elsevier, Elsevier publishes this amount of manuscripts per year. Elsevier publishes 17% approximately of the total number of scholarly articles published worldwide. Elsevier has now approximately 3,000 active journals. So you see again, we cannot complain from the offer side. And Elsevier is structured in 4 broad areas. I'm going to specifically one of those, social sciences and humanities, which in turn is organized into 7 different subtopics, let's say. One of them is decision sciences. Decision sciences, in turn, is organized or subdivided into 3 different topics. And if we go into one of those, so we are going to depth 3 in this tree. And if we look at decision sciences and computers, we find many journals. This is just a family of journals, many of which I'm sure you know, like YHORG, for instance, well, computers and OR, discrete applied mathematics, the Euro journals there. I don't see here operations research for healthcare. Actually, it's not in this family, although we have the same publisher. But I know that OR for healthcare, for instance, I know the editor very well, and I know the editorial policy very well. It's the type of journal that welcomes very much the type of work that you do, because Stefan Nicol, the editor, looks a lot for really applications, because he doesn't believe in OR, in healthcare, that is not applied. So I would say that it's a good journal for that. But let me talk a little bit about computers and operations research, just for you to get an idea about what managing a journal means. Some numbers, so it has been printed since 1974 in 180 volumes. We have 12 volumes per year, approximately 7,700 manuscripts can be found online. Some of them, unfortunately, are still not online. The content is hosted on Science Direct, like all contents on Elsevier. We have over 500,000 full text downloads per year, and we have over 2,000 submissions a year. So when you see these numbers, you see this is a big thing. And we are just talking about one journal out of 23,000 that we find around the globe, okay? This is the link to the journal. Well, the journal is currently structured. This is new, actually. I have to celebrate the 50th birthday of the journal in 2025. I decided to organize the journal into areas because it was not actually, there were no formal areas in the journal. Now I organized the journal into 7 areas. And of course, there's some people doing the work with me. Alice Smith, she is the editor-in-chief of one famous UTV24 journal, the Informed Journal on Computing. Alice has been with me since the very beginning. She's, I would say, my right hand arm in computers and operations research. She is responsible for a journal or for a section within Computers and OR, because Computers and OR has absorbed 2 journals over its history. The last one was Surveys in ORMS, Operations Research and Management Science, and Alice is taking care of that. And then we have 7 area editors. In addition to this team of 9 people, we also have an editorial advisory board of people from anywhere. So you see, it's a big team working for the journal. So when we reject the paper, we don't do it just because we don't like the paper or the author or no. Usually there are at least 2 people involved in that decision in Computers and OR, and very often there are 4 people involved in the decision. Okay, this is just for you to get an idea about the authorship in the journal. It's interesting that China is growing a lot as a scientific power. And we see that not only in computers and OR, but also I talked with other editors, and we realized this is a trend in other journals. And this figure here allows me to talk about something. This is the yellow bars are the number of submitted papers per year, and the green bars are the number of accepted papers per year. Well, these bars are not immediately comparable because, for instance, out of these papers here that were accepted in 24, some were submitted in 23. Okay, but what is important to see in this figure is that in computers and OR we cannot publish what we want. There are some guidelines from the publishers, so we more or less need to reject around 80 to 85% of the papers we get. So we really need to be selective. So sometimes when we reject a paper, it's not because the paper is not a proper paper. It's because it's not a decent work that is in there. It's just because we see that we cannot classify that paper in this selective range that we need to consider so that we keep with the numbers that somehow are imposed to us, because we have 12 volumes per year, more or less in between 200 and 300 papers a year. And this brings me to another question that I like to discuss. Possibly, this is not an exhaustive slide, but I think it's important for us to think what is exactly that we are looking for as authors. Because it's only if we know the answer to that question that we can discuss if the offer is good or bad, if the system is good or bad. Well, I would say that there are four main things that we look as authors. The first, of course, is registration of our work. We want to register as ours on a certain date. And we also want to assert the ownership and the shift priority in our findings. This is one thing. Another one is validation. It's important to publish because we get the research, and by implication, ourselves as authors, quality stamped by publishing in a journal or in a good journal, okay? And of course, we want to establish a reputation and to get awards. All of us like that, I mean. Then we want, of course, to disseminate our work. Publishing is a very nice way to disseminate our work. So we can let the peers know what we are doing, and we can, of course, attract recognition and collaboration. And finally, I would say that we want to do it so that it stays somehow in an archive. So we want to leave a permanent record of our research. Well, and in the end, who doesn't like to be renowned and to have the name in some paper that lasts? But then the question is, okay, we understand, possibly there are other things, I'm not trying to be exhaustive, okay? But when are we ready to publish? So when we go for a journal, are we already ready to publish? This is an interesting question that I also like to discuss a lot, because in my opinion, more often than not, we submit a paper before we are ready to publish it or to submit. Well, a good way, but it's a bit vague, is to say when we have information that advances understanding in the scientific field. Well, there are different ways for accomplishing it. It may be that we are presenting new, original results or methods, or we are rationalizing, refining, or reinterpreting existing results, or we are reviewing some research stream, let's say. I would say that it's one out of these three. But then, suppose that we have this. Are we still ready to publish? Are we ready to submit? Well, I would say that we are if we have a strong manuscript. And more the market is competitive and we need a strong manuscript. So you can ask, but what is a strong manuscript? Well, a strong manuscript, in my opinion, is a manuscript that has a novel, clear, useful, and exciting message. And very often in computers and OR, the papers that are rejected fail in at least one of those four things, okay? Sometimes the works are very nice, but the authors don't have patience to write. They think that writing is a burden. So then they put the PhD writing papers, they don't have experience. And sometimes the papers are rejected because they were just not properly written. It's not because the message is not good or is not exciting, okay?
Can I just ask if that journal is in English? Do you accept papers written in English?
Computers and operations research, yes.
And that's true of a lot of highly rated journals, isn't it?
This is true, but I mean, nowadays Elsevier has even offices to support people with the language. This is not an excuse. Not, I mean, submitting a paper that is not properly written, there is no excuse for that nowadays, I would say. Okay, because there are proper offices to support that kind of. Every author has access to that.
I did edit with YHORG about 20 years ago, and I had a phrase for badly written, grammatically written papers, get a native English speaker to check your draft before you resubmit.
Exactly, but sometimes the problem with the writing is not English, because the PhD students are very good nowadays. Going at ChatGPT to correct the English. When I say badly written, it's not because I'm not talking about English, it's technical. You see that the PhD student is not well aware of the terminology, doesn't know how to structure a paper. I mean, this is, in my opinion, more serious than the grammar issues. And this is what I see more often than not, honestly. Okay, because in terms of language nowadays, with ChatGPT, they just put it there in Grammarly or one of these tools. There are no grammar mistakes in the papers nowadays. It's very rare that I see grammar mistakes, I must say, nowadays. Well, of course, the paper should be constructed in a logical manner. And it's important, and this is something that we forget very often, that when we submit a paper, our message should be easily understood. Because our paper is assessed by editors and reviewers that, like everybody in this room, are very busy people. We don't have time to understand what the authors were not able to explain. It's not our role to understand the authors. It's the role of the authors to tell us what they want to tell. Well, and another thing that is related a bit with the challenge that Diego gave to me is related to the choice of the right journal. In fact, this is another thing that many of us don't do well. Well, first, many of us just descend the stairs. I still see this a lot. People go to the best journals, then to the second level, to the second league, then they go to the third league, and at some point, they go to MDPI.
Sometimes at the same time.
Sometimes at the same time. In computers and OR, I ban the authors because nowadays AI works not only from the side of the author, but also from the side of the editors. So it's very often, every week more or less, I ban some authors from submitting to the journal during my term as editor, exactly because we get the information that the paper is being assessed in at least some other journal. So you may ask, but then how do we choose the right journal? And this comes to, again, the challenge that Diego gave to me. I think that our work in the journals are a bit like falling in love or like personal relationships. The thing is that sometimes I fell in love by someone who does not fall in love by me. And it's the same with our journals, is that very often we want we like journals that don't like our work, and we don't like journals that like our work. So there is a matching problem here, but one very important thing is that we check in a very detailed way the candidate journals for our work. And there are many ways to do it. We can go to the aims and scope, we can check the accepted articles in the journal, we can look for the readership, who is the readership of this journal, and we can look also for current trends and topics in the journal to see if our paper fits there or not. The thing is that more often than not, we submit a paper without even look at these things. We just try and see if it works. So let me show you. In computers and OR, it's very easy to find the aims and scope. It's over there. It's very clear because I redesigned it, and usually I'm a very focused guy. So it took me some time, but when I had the text, it was there. There are many, many guidelines for the authors in computers and OR, and I realized that the researchers just ignore them. They don't care about the engine scope, which makes my life easier. Because, I mean, as soon as a paper fails one of those things, I just reject it directly, and that's it. Let me give you an example. For instance, these are just two examples of things that I have in computers and OR. I say explicitly that numerical examples are not enough, because this is about the use of computers, and we want intensive use of computers. We want the results to be accessible and comparable with other methods, with other models, with other tools. So very often I get a paper with a very nice genetic algorithm. This is the most common one. And in the end, they put a case study. And when I look, it's not a case study. It's a fake instance. One thing is a case study. And this I value a lot, and we have some in computers and OR. For instance, not long ago, we published a paper on how to optimize the accessibility to drinkable water in remote areas in Nepal. It's still implemented, and it's a real case study. The thing is that very often, you have to say, I'm using geographical data, but then the demands were confidential, so we decided to generate them. Of course, this is not the idea. Let me show you another example. We say that in computers and OR, map heuristics, other than well-established algorithms like and colony optimization, for instance, must be described in metaphor-free language. This is written in the engine scope of the job. And actually, it was by chance, before I was invited by Diego to make this presentation, I thought, because I was talking to my good friend Gilles Laporte about these methods coming from the bestiary, as we call them. And in the very beginning of January, so since the year began, just papers submitted to computers and OR since January the 1st, so less than 3 months ago, I decided to collect, of course, they are best rejected, but I decided to take note of all the methods that the authors came up with. And you want to see in 2.5 months, this is what I got. Like antlion, Armenian search optimizer, crayfish, whales, waves, sparrows, everything. This is just since the beginning of January. I keep collecting them. So if you invite me for another talk, perhaps I have several slides with these. And of course, some of these repeat, okay? And this to say that it is very important to look at the engine scope of a journal to see if the journal fits. Recently, to celebrate the 50th birthday, and I'm finishing, we wrote a paper. I invited the 2 previous editors of Computers and OR who are alive. Unfortunately, Sam Rath has passed away. And of course, we asked some colleagues to do the analytical part to collect all the information, but the 3 editors, Gilles Laporte, Stephen Nicol, and myself, supervised entirely this paper. And it's a paper that I like. I hate these bibliometric papers. This is one thing, don't send that to computers and OR because I hate those. Let's say 10% of the papers were published in YHORG, 9% in Omega, 8% in computers and OR, then by year, then by I don't know what. I mean, this is not interesting, in my opinion, for a good job. So I'm a bit critical, and also, fortunately, Gilles Laporte and Stephen Nicol are also quite critical about this type of paper. So we were very picky with this bibliometric paper. But we got some nice conclusions. I'm not going too much over that. I just want to show the type of papers that we were publishing in the beginning. Still, we see that routing, for instance, and scheduling was already a very popular topic in the very beginning of computers and OR. But also, we could find, for instance, a very nice paper. This paper is still very much cited nowadays by Richard Larson. It's a very nice paper, I must say. Everybody in facility location should know it quite well. And you see, this is the most recent decade. And we see somehow a change from exact approaches to heuristics. We see some areas like healthcare getting preeminence. We have papers in healthcare in computers and OR, but also, as you can see, for instance, agri-food industry, it's also another area that we see a lot. So this is a set of papers that we found out as being the most influential. Well, you may ask, how do we classify a paper as influential? We explain that in the paper. Okay, so if you want the details, it's like half page. explaining how we select the paper as being influential. So the question is the future of this. Are we doing our job well? Well, I would say that for the publishers, this is a business. I cannot complain because I have full editorial freedom in computers and all. The thing is that with 23,000 journals around the globe, we must be very much specific in terms of aims and scope. So we should be very precise and we should target the right paper, the right journal for our work. I'm pretty convinced, I'm pretty much convinced that for every paper of ours, if it is a decent work and if it is very well written, there is always the right journal. The thing is, as I told you, is that very often the journals where we like to publish there don't have our paper. But this is a different thing. It doesn't matter. For instance, I was thinking about the Informed Journal on applied analytics. This is a journal where you can only publish if you prove that what you have done is being used by a company. You must prove it. And if you get it, it's very easy to publish in that journal. Very, very easy. And the informed journals, as you know, are quite selective. But I can assure you that if you get that proof, your method is working, then you can easily publish in that journal. So what is the future of STM publishing? Well, I cannot foresee the future. So I thought everybody is using ChatGPT nowadays. So I decided, let me ask the ChatGPT, what do you think is the future of STM publishing? Well, I must say that I try to use ChatGPT as I advise my students to do it. I mean, to be critical. So I got a few things that I like it, and I think, oh, makes sense. And some others that I think, this is a bit strange. Anyway, it depends on the sources that ChatGPT goes. But I picked a few things that, in my opinion, are quite relevant. First, there is a clear movement towards open access. Then, towards digital transformation and artificial intelligence. Then, preprints and alternative publishing methods. We see a lot of those in, I mean, there are many evidence of these three movements. But we see more and more, for instance, things printed in non-traditional formats, for instance, as a post in social media. We see that more and more, okay? But there are more things that I found given by ChatGPT a lot, but I just selected a few. Increased focus on research integrity and ethics, of course. I mean, if it's easier to produce these things, if it's easier to use ChatGPT, we see a lot of people cheating, unfortunately. And as an editor-in-chief, I must say that I could write one in the thick book with the things that I have observed in the past 9 years. I have seen things that sometimes I think, why didn't these people use their creativity to produce research instead of trying to fake the system? But we see a lot of them, okay? So we see a lot of increased concerns in terms of integrity and ethics. We need more collaboration between publishers and institutions, of course, institutional partnerships, publishing platforms with integrated tools. There are many ideas in Elsevier to do this. I don't have time to discuss what's being thought about that. And subscription and revenue models. Of course, we must think about revenue, and this is comes in my final slide. I think there are opportunities nowadays in terms of STM publishing. We have a greater openness. All the publishers, for instance, you can publish in computers and all are open source, as you can do in, I would say, almost or most of the journals. You can do it. Of course, there is a digital transformation, and there is a shift on how scholarly communication is structured. This is clear, and we must live with it. But I look at these things as challenges, not as threats. What are the what's opportunities? Sorry, not as threats. What are the challenges, in my opinion? There are two. The first, we must ensure the financial sustainability for publishers, because they do a very important work that we want all of us want it to be done, honestly. And of course, maintaining research integrity. This is quite difficult because, as I told you, I see more and more people trying to deceive the system. You may ask, what about quality? Well, I think that quality goes with the numbers. Nowadays, we are very much focused on the numbers. We want to have many papers. We want to have many citations. But I remember 25 years ago, when a researcher was publishing 5 papers a year, we said, oh, I remember, for instance, the first time I met one known researcher in location science, Ken Rosen, who has already passed away. When I used to smoke, I remember sharing cigarettes with him in some conferences and talking. I was just a kid, let's say, scientifically speaking, and he was already a grown up. And he used to publish 5 papers a year, which was something outstanding at the time. Nowadays, I am not outstanding, and I can easily publish 5, 6, 7, 5 times. It's just a matter of time. And I'm not outstanding because these outstanding people nowadays are publishing 40 papers a year. So this to say that quality goes with the numbers. We should not think now it's easier to publish, I'm going to publish 5. But publishing 5 papers per year nowadays, I mean, I think it's easy. It's easy. Just find the right journals, right things, and I mean, it's not an issue, I would say. Publishing 40 papers with 10 of them in UTV 24 list, for instance, or even if you want to relax it a bit, FT50, then we are talking about outstanding policy. Okay, so I would say that in the end, no matter the trend, no matter the numbers, no matter what counts on, even if people cheat the system, quality will always come up. And I think this is it. I'm really sorry for the time. I think I ran out of time, but it's always like this. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, the reason I came to this, I mentioned I was in George for 5 years. I also was chair of the OR
It's awards panel, and one of the awards was the Good Eve Medal for the Our Society Journal. So for 10 years, the 3 of us looked at all the papers in JAWS. As editor, I had hoped, because my background's a practitioner, I was the last practitioner editor, couldn't be possible now. I had hopes that I could publish practice-oriented papers, but that didn't prove to be the case. But I had hoped that practitioners would get something from at least some of the material in the journal. And my observation over this 10 years was that possibly a majority, papers are in very niche areas now. There may not be very many people doing advanced research in that area, but the referees are also drawn from that area. So it's not only difficult, I'm talking about accessibility of research, it's not only difficult for practitioners, almost everyone outside the niche area where that paper fits finds great difficulty in understanding it because it's written for that small group of people. So what can be done? And this isn't original. I discovered there was forums in America through Informed addressing this question. One thing I noticed was that titles of papers do not often properly signify what's in the paper. And so it is important that the editor ensures that. They shouldn't be frightened of changing an author's title to give better. And the other thing we suggested was perhaps there should be 2 abstracts for papers, one for people inside that niche area, one for everyone else, which is written in a much more general way so that it would be accessible to a wider audience. And it is Robert Files, Professor Files and I wrote a letter to the OR Society magazine, OR Inside, hoping that would generate a discussion about that topic. And it didn't. But sorry, let me finish. So we finished by writing these specific proposals to the OR Society's Publications Committee, and they rejected them, I think on the grounds that it might deter publications if you had to do this extra step of providing to so I just wondered what your comment.
Yeah, the journals that I need to know, I've been able to.
Can you talk from the perspective of the journal that you?
Yeah, sure. This is what I was going to say exactly. That of course, I mean, 2 abstracts may be a bit demanding for the authors. Since I became editor, again, another thing that I put in games and scope of computers and OR is that computers and OR is a very broad journal in terms of the papers it attracts. So every paper should be written, it's explicitly written in the engine scope of the journal, but many authors just ignore it. I write explicitly that every paper submitted to computers and OR should be written in such a way that it recognizes that many readers of computers and OR are not experts or do not work in the specific area of the paper. So for the paper to have merit to be published in computers and OR should be written in a language that is accessible for the majority of the readers. This I have done, and of course I best reject papers that fail to comply to this indication, and I reject many because of this, because I say this is too specific. I would say that perhaps 20% of the desk rejections we made in computers and OR are exactly because this paper is too specific for the audience of this journal. That's it. That should be other journals covering that. I mean, possibly, but it's not computers and OR the right journal.
I think that's fantastic. You actually make sure that what's going out to the readership is not just aimed at that niche. I think your idea around two versions is,
I don't think that'll be too difficult. And maybe the referees could do it.
Yeah. But I think there's quite a lot of people in, certainly in my past work life, have gone to look for just ideas. And if you've got a really good idea that's wrapped up in terminology, people will just look at it and swipe left.
But you see that a lot of papers like scheduling this type of machines for left-handed people. I'm left-handed, that's why I give the example. And I mean, we don't do that in computers and OR. I mean, because this is only methods for people using that specific machine or left-handed people. I mean, this is what not really for. But this is, I mean, it's up to the editors to make these editorial decisions. As I told you, in most of the cases, we have complete editorial freedom. As far as, of course, we don't disrupt completely the aims and scope of the journal, because, of course, I cannot say that now there is computers and OR is going to behave like Omega or like each other. I mean, each journal has some specific purpose. But within this purpose, the editorial freedom that I have in LCD is so I can do these things. So I don't want a paper that doesn't compare with this. Yes, I'm doing it.
Other question, maybe anyone? Thanks for a very nice presentation. Something hit my attention around 4 qualities that you would like to see in a paper. You remember? And in particular, I was interested by the latter one. So the paper submitted to be exciting. So, which refers to a psychic reaction to. But no, my question was, of course, we don't have a definition from Elsevier of what can be exciting, an official one, but what is exciting for you as an editor-in-chief?
For me, exciting is one of these papers that after reading the abstract and the first 2 paragraphs, I don't get bored. Because sometimes the language is so hermetic, so, I mean, this is boring. What do they mean with this? When you start thinking like this, it's not exciting to read that paper. It's exciting in the sense that, like when you read a novel, I mean, if you after 20 pages get bored, very often you just put the book aside. It's a little bit like that. It's exciting in that sense. It's not something physical or chemical, let's say. It's, I mean, because it happens a lot that I start reading the paper and after the introduction I say, oh, this is nice. And then as an editor, sometimes I take a lot of time with the paper just because I start reading it and I cannot stop. For me, this is an exciting way of writing. So it's a nice message transmitting in a nice way.
Yeah, question. This may sound a bit confrontational, but it's not meant that way. I'm genuinely curious as to your thoughts. Given that you're editor-in-chief and Elsevier makes 37% profit margin, which is huge. Most of that is public money. Does that ever feel, what are your thoughts on that? Does that ever make you feel conflicted about being an Elsevier journal or not at all?
Well, as I told you, this is why I wanted to talk about Robert Maxwell and Fairbairn. If we publish nowadays, it's that because STM publishing became a business. Of course, we may not like it, but the alternative was that we would be able to publish today. So we may disagree with the business model. Usually I don't interfere much with that. And when I interfere is to make a few things better for the journal. For instance, I created a special article category, which is by invitation only, which I call a feature article. So it's, I invite the authors to write on a specific topic, and these papers become open access without the authors having to pay anything. Also, we have a yearly award in Computers and OR, where we are giving open access to the winner for some time. And also Elsevier is giving open access to most of the papers in the very first weeks after their publication, although many people don't recognize that. The thing is that very often people try to download them when they are already under a subscription contract. Okay. YHORG, I'm looking at because there is the manager of Europe. I must say that YHORG is an exception in different things in Elsevier because YHORG doesn't belong purely to Elsevier. It's published by Elsevier, but belongs to Europe as the Federation of the European OR Societies. But this to say that Elsevier currently is very much aware of this. And very often they also give the authors the opportunity to have a reduction in the publication fees. Elsevier, I would say that it's, and also Springer, these are the two that I know, I don't know the others, but I would say that they are being quite attentive to all this. But of course, they have a lot of jobs. They have a lot of people working for us to put the papers in a nice way, with all these links. Of course, sometimes they don't do it perfectly, let's say. But I mean, they need to get people to prepare the manuscripts. So I mean, they need to get that money. The day they don't get that money, you are free to publish the papers, whatever the format you want. And then you see really strange things, like authors just putting formulas as images and things like that. And this is something that we don't want to see. So we need to pay a price for that, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is, in the field of OR, or based on your experience or your knowledge in the reviewing submissions, is there what do you observe in terms of the relationship between the quality of the paper and between the quality of the paper and whether it has a funding or not? Is it a very strong relationship or strong or moderate?
No. Honestly, I don't see any relation, unfortunately, between those two. No. Some papers are heavily funded, some papers are not. For instance, I must say that in Portugal, we don't have money for anything. In the UK, you talk about grants of millions of pounds. In Portugal, I didn't have any money, and still I could publish. I mean, it's a matter of creativity, of finding your way through the system. I mean, for instance, I see people in the UK who have had like 20 million pounds in grants, and I don't see scientific production matching that. Probably they have revolutionized companies or institutions, I don't know, but I'm not a consultant and I'm not a practitioner, so I'm an academician. So this to say that, I mean, I don't see any relation, honestly.
I'm a bit aware of the time.
Yeah.
So if everybody's okay with me, I will finish with the meeting for the YHORG. And then, well, a couple of surprises if I have for you, and then we can have a coffee and continue if there is any extra question. So first of all, I wanted to ask, if you are not members of the OR Society, please become members of the OR Society. It will be lovely to have more people, in particular women, and that's why Shoshan is here with us.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Xiaochen. Thanks for this opportunity I want to take this opportunity to promote an event which was called The Things I Wish to Know Earlier. So first of all, I will introduce myself. My name is Xiao Chunfen. I did my PhD at the University of Sheffield, and then I'm now doing postdoc at the University of Bath. But today I came here as a committee member of YHORG at the OR Society. So we have a event which will happening in April, 29th of April, 1:30 p.m. So it's called The Things I Wish to Know Earlier, and it will be a joint event organized by YHORG, the Women in OR Network, along with the ECR, the Early Career Researcher Network. And this event, the aim of the event is to bring in the people who works both in the academia, but also in the industry as practitioners to show their different aha moments, basically the things they wish to know earlier, to show their experience so that the audience will learn from them. So we put up our amazing panel. First of all, for some of you might know the Sonia Krum. She used to work for the government Department of Health, but now she kind of like transit to the University College London as a professor in OR. And also we invited the Owen Daniel, which is a deputy director at the Office for National Statistics and Data Science Campus. And also Stefan, he used to work at the University of Exeter, but he is now starting up his own consulting company, as well as games development corporation, like operational research analytics. And finally, we have Shuya Zhong, who is associate professor in logistics and supply chain management at the University of Bath. And she came from a very relatively engineering background, but now she is working in the management school. So we bring in all of these people who works in OR, but from different backgrounds, who has, Owen was mainly works in the industry, and Sonia was like transition from the working for government to the academia, and Stefan was transition from the academia to the industry. So we would like to invite you to our event. It will be an online event. You can find the link on the OR Society website to join us for this event. And thank you.
Thanks, Shashan. Two more small things. If you are not members of OR Society, please become members. If you are members, please join YHORG. We are excited to have more people. Max has been trying to revamp the group and to attract more people. It will be amazing if we become a larger society and a more engaged society. We know that we exist. We don't have we don't know who the members of the group are. There are some policies of the Operational Research Society that I don't really understand. As for example, we don't know who are the members of the group, and we cannot have the emails of the members of the group because of some bizarre understanding of data protection. But that is a fact. And I don't know how do they understand or how do they interpret the data protection law, but I cannot have, as a chair of the committee, I cannot have the emails of the members of the committee, which is hilarious, but that is the way things work with our society. I'm throwing the stones against my own wall. I hope that this will not go on record. But anyway, or maybe they should hear. But anyway, important thing is that we should be together. I think that we are an amazing community and we have lots of things to share, practitioners and academics. Talking about practitioners or semi-practitioners and academics, people from research institutes or research centers like AMRC, please become members. We need you. We need you with us. Okay? That's why I invited you, Jensu and Marco. They are colleagues at the Advanced Manufacturing Research Center in Sheffield, which is part of Sheffield University. And I think that having people from diverse profiles will improve the kind of work that we can do together. One more thing, and this is an announcement, we need a secretary for YHORG. Okay, we have two co-chairs, Max and myself, and we are looking for a secretary. I would love to hear some expressions, we would love to hear some expressions of interest. If you could please send an email. There is nothing needed apart from a bit of enthusiasm and a few minutes per month to devote to the group. And apart from that, there is not much more to do. I mean, it's not a big job description that you need to consider. It's just basically be part of YHORG and have the enthusiasm for doing it. And if you are not a member of YHORG, then become a member of YHORG and express interest in the same email, and that will be absolutely fantastic. Okay, it has been a pleasure. Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Sajid is gone, and thank you very, very much to Leeds University for receiving us today here and for the joint seminar. Thanks, everyone.